Hey everyone, welcome. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. Thanks so much for being here. Hopefully you're in the right place. This is our Walk, Ride, Enroll webinar series. And today we're talking all about enhancing safe routes to school through Vision Zero, or I guess in some cases could be enhancing Vision Zero through safe routes to school. So hopefully you all are in the right place. Feel free to say hello in the chat. We'll give people a few minutes to jump in. Let us know who you are, your connection to safe routes to school, and where you're joining us from today. And the chat should be open for you all. So whoever wants to kick us off and get that started, feel free. And I'll just give people a few minutes to jump on. Hi, Adam. Thanks for joining us and kicking us off today. I always like to see where people are coming from. See, LA is in the room, Indianapolis, Wichita, Vegas, nice. Massachusetts. Hi, Mandy. Nice to see you from Schuylkill Vision. I drove by Frackville over the weekend, so I was definitely thinking of you. New Mexico, great. Tacoma, Washington. Awesome. So keep saying hello in the chat, and we'll give it another minute or so, and then we will dive right into our content for today. We have a lot to cover. This is a very hot topic, apparently, safe routes to school and Vision Zero. So I hope that we have a lot of time to share all the great information that we want to give you all today. So go ahead and continue on in the chat, and I will just give a few quick housekeeping slides and then turn it over to our presenters that we have today. So for those of you who are familiar with Safe Routes Partnership, you already know a bit about our organization and know a bit about me. I'm Corey Johnson. I'm our Program and Engagement Manager here at Safe Routes Partnership. I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland. And for those of you who might be new to our organization, Safe Routes is a national organization, and we really work to advance safe walking and rolling to and from schools and other everyday destinations, whether that's parks or libraries or grocery stores, and really working to improve the health and well-being of people of all races, income levels, abilities, disabilities, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. So if you're new to our organization, welcome, nice to meet you. And if you've been here before, it's nice to see you all again. So a few housekeeping slides before we kind of dive into our topic for today. So obviously the chat is open. Feel free to continue sharing resources, saying hello, just giving us some general commentary about what we'll be talking about today. We will have time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the Q&A box. That way we can keep track of what's a question and what's a comment, because sometimes we get a lot of different questions. So questions and Q&A, and chat and general messages in the chat box is fine. We're also recording this webinar, so we'll have a recording available along with the slide deck after the webinar. So I'll send out a follow-up email with all of that information. And again, it looks like you all have already started saying hello in the chat box, so continue to do that throughout the webinar. And if you have any other, again, comments or things to share, feel free to use the chat as you would like. We hope that this can be something that's really, interactive, and that we're all sharing our ideas and resources as well. So the chat is open for you to do so. All right, and just a little bit about our presenters today. So, of course, I'm Corey Johnson. I just said my hello. You all see me often on these webinars. And today I'm joined by two really awesome presenters from City of Denver to talk about how they've integrated their Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero program. So we have John Johnson, who's the Associate City Planner with City and County of Denver, and then Ralph Eisinger, who's the Vision Zero Program Manager with City of Denver. So it's nice because you have somebody who works on the Safe Routes to School side and somebody who works on the Vision Zero side. And John and Rolf really talk about how they kind of merge their two programs and work together to enhance traffic safety across the city. So I'm super excited to have them on board. And before I hand it off to them to talk about all the great things happening in Denver, I have just a few intro slides to kind of get us thinking about Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero and why this topic is so important. So I believe most people are familiar with Vision Zero, but just if you're not, or just want a little recap, Vision Zero is basically an international road safety movement to eliminate all traffic fatalities and serious injuries. It started in Sweden in the 90s and has grown since then and is continuing to grow across the country, both in small communities to our biggest cities. So those of you who might be in smaller communities, don't feel like Vision Zero has to be this big city thing. We see Vision Zero growing in all types of communities. And so, like I mentioned, there are cities, counties, and towns across the country that either have Vision Zero programs that are, currently running or that are in development. And I want to launch a quick poll and just see if your community has Vision Zero programs. Let me go ahead and launch this. So I'm curious to know, in your community, do you have a Vision Zero program? In your community, it might be a city program, a county program, something in your town. Just love to get a sense of, your experience working with Vision Zero. So I'll give this a few more seconds to see where we are with Vision Zero in this group. Take about 10 more seconds. If you haven't filled out the poll, go ahead and do so. 5 seconds. All right, so I'll go ahead and end this. So it looks like the majority of you do have some sort of Vision Zero program in your community. There are others who don't, and there are some who aren't sure. And if you're not sure, that's fine. We can also let you know who to contact to find out if Vision Zero is something that's happening in your community. So that's good for us to know, just to get a sense of, who's in the virtual room with us today. And I'm also curious, for those of you who do have Vision Zero programs, if in the chat box you could share if there have been any partnerships between Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero and what that's looked like in your community. So for example, have you created a Vision Zero plan and Safe Routes to School plan and work together to create those plans? Or have you done events together or infrastructure projects together, or included things for students and kids as a part of the Vision Zero plan or project? So in the chat box, if you could just share a little bit about if there's been any sort of Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School integration in your community, I'd love to hear about that as well. So let's see, it looks like in Tacoma, Washington, Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero support each other in their goals and plans. Safe Routes to School prioritization analysis uses the Vision Zero high-risk network to help prioritize school needs. So that's great. Thanks, Caitlin, talking about what's happening in Tacoma, Washington. Lowering speed limits in front of school zones. I've seen that a lot, in the communities that I've worked with in DC and in Baltimore. There are some communities where there is a Vision Zero plan, but not a Safe Routes to School plan. So that's good to know. There might be some opportunities for integration there. Starting on some Safe Routes, Safe Streets for All planning soon. Dustin, that's great news. Pete from Philly, Philly Safe Routes to School program lives under their Vision Zero team. So that often happens as well, where Vision Zero is kind of the umbrella program, and then Safe Routes to School is nestled underneath it. So yeah, it seems like there has been some integration just looking at the chat box, which is really great. And like I mentioned, we'll get another great example of what this looks like when I hand things over to John and Rolf. And if you have any other examples, feel free to continue adding them into the chat box. I always love to read what you all are up to and what's going on. And so just a few quick points about why we're actually talking about this today. What is the point of talking about Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School? So both programs and partners can kind of bring different things to the table, right? So Safe Routes to School, it is a school-based program. So people who are working in the Safe Routes to School space might have school contacts or community member contacts, that expertise when it comes to child safety and child mobility. A lot of the community engagement that you all do that is really school-based can help inform a Vision Zero program. Safe Routes to School is also really like fun and accessible way to make traffic safety, a bit easier to understand and a bit more engaging. So Safe Routes to School can really kind of bring that accessibility piece, and also fun. Things like bike rodeos are fun, or walk and roll to school day is fun, bike and roll to school day is fun. Safe Routes to School can definitely bring the fun factor to some of the Vision Zero programs and initiatives that are out there. At the same time, Vision Zero can also bring a lot of things to safe routes to school. So whether it's that transportation planning or engineering expertise, that could be one way that that Vision Zero can help enhance safe routes to school. Infrastructure improvements. I know that some of you mentioned infrastructure in your collaboration examples. That's something that a Vision Zero program could bring to safe routes to school. Action planning, you all mentioned some Vision Zero action plans, safe routes to school action plans. John and Rolf will talk a bit about their action planning process in Denver. Somebody else earlier mentioned the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding. So there are funding opportunities that can be a part of Vision Zero, and also that large scale communication and messaging around Vision Zero. So Vision Zero often operates, like I mentioned, it could be a county level or a city level, and sometimes that mouthpiece can be a bit different and a bit bigger than a Safe Routes to School program, again, depending on the situation or the city or the context. So, being able to use that Vision Zero platform to amplify safe routes to school can also be another way to think about what these collaborations look like. And again, if you have others, add them to the chat box, please continue to do so. We love to see them. And with that, I'm actually going to hand things over to John and Rolf because they have a lot to share about what Vision Zero's looked like, what Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School looked like in Denver. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and invite John and Rolf to come on.
All right. Yeah, I'll kick things off. My name is Rolf Eisinger, and I manage Denver's Vision Zero program. I've been with the city since 2018 when Denver hired its first Vision Zero program manager per a commitment in our Vision Zero action plan. And looking back, John, go ahead and flip the slide to the next one, please. And looking back, Denver did pledge Vision Zero back in 2016, allocated funds and developed the plan in 2017 and identified, you need somebody to manage the plan and therefore asked for more funding for the next year. And that's where I came in 2018. So they had funding in 2018 to bring somebody on. So next slide, please. Yeah, so just like many action plans, I'd say our action plan did crunch a lot of data, which helped identify our high injury network. 5% of our roadways, equaling about 50% of our traffic-related fatalities. And with the data, not only data, but a lot of outreach to community who helped set our core principles that you see on the right side of the screen. And I'd say just getting your arms around some of these principles, it can be a little daunting thinking about the fact that traffic deaths and serious injuries are preventable and unacceptable. Also, human life and health are prioritized within all aspects of our transportation system, knowing that people are going to make mistakes, but our transportation system should be designed so that their mistakes don't cost them their lives or a debilitating injury. Safety work should focus on the system level above influencing individual behaviors and acknowledging that speed has a direct link to crash severity and frequency. So it takes a lot to I'd say understand those, and these definitely came from the Vision Zero Network, and our community affirmed that yes, those should be our principles as well. So let's go to the next slide. So the action plan had several annual metrics that we tracked, including a certain number of traffic safety or traffic signal safety improvements, number of bike lanes installed per year, number of sidewalk miles installed per year. We also had a metric that stated number of safe routes to school travel plans that needed to be developed and implemented, as well as to create that culture of safety, which includes schools and children. Next slide. With all these metrics, definitely have to have governance and org structures and a process to work within. And that's something that we stood up here in Public Works at the time, and now we're the Department of Transportation Infrastructure. But we developed our org structure for implementing the Vision Zero Action Plan. And with that, we had several working groups, and one was geared towards the safe routes to school efforts called out in the plan. This working group helped identify the need to develop a safe route school action plan, which mimicked many of the ways that the Vision Zero action plan was created in its development. And John will be talking more about that here shortly. So next slide. A couple other things just kind of highlighting here. Our first action plan had concluded back into December, and we have launched a new action plan refocusing Vision Zero. And maybe we can jump to the next slide there. Yeah, so this action plan calls out a number of different actions, talking about more in the policy space, I'd say. Also, we identified that just not corridors, but safety focus areas where many of the same types of crashes were occurring to our vulnerable roadway users. So identifying safety focus areas, and this is a tip of a hat to John. He'll be talking about the travel plans here in a minute. Also identifying the need to dig into more of a speed reduction effort, better align our arterial collector streets with our complete streets guidelines and those design speeds, those lower limit design speeds of 25 miles an hour. Also better understanding our crash data and continuing to do so. We've done a lot of work in this space, but definitely ensure that all project managers have access to the root causes of crashes happening within their project limits. Standing up an evaluation program. Are the projects that we're implementing changing the behaviors that we want outside of just number of crashes? Oftentimes, if we rely on that metric, we have to wait several years in order to get a sample size in order to see a difference. But what about if we could measure yielding behaviors, speeds, ridership, people walking more, using the facilities that we're hoping to change those behaviors? Another action in the plan, and this is a theme that came out of it, was we saw that transit was the safest mode of moving people in our city. We hadn't had a single traffic fatality when somebody was on a bus or a train. So how can we leverage and support and expedite our bus rapid transit network and other transit related facilities, especially because many of these align with our hydrogen network. Yeah, thank you, John. Good. A couple others here. Colorado has a new photo enforcement bill, I'd say. So the use of red light cameras and also speed cameras on corridors now, creating slow zones or slow zones within our community, and really focusing on those quick build efforts where we can, once we identify a need, we can turn it around 6 to 8 months and get it out on the street. Continue to support some of our other programs in terms of pedestrian, bike, micromobility, and transit networks. And this one speaks to our Safe Route School Action Plan as well, number 11 here, creating a multimodal safety curriculum K through 12. Really teaching the next generation, making sure they're tooled up on multimodal modes, such as how to ride a bike, how to take transit, scooter riding, and yes, driving a vehicle with an enhanced awareness about other roadway users on the street. Other actions in the plan, really continuing to work with our community. Without the community, we will not reach zero. And also, where we can for the city and county of Denver, lead by example as a Vision Zero adopter with some of the telematics and some of the other software in our vehicles, and really embracing that internal culture of safety work. Next slide. I believe that's it. I'll hand it over to you, John. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. Thanks for the introduction and overview of the Vision Zero action plan and the history of Vision Zero and how that led into Safe Routes to School. Clearly, we'll go ahead and pivot here to Safe Routes to School and highlight the reasons why it's important for Vision Zero and Safe Routes teams to work together, and maybe offer some ideas and opportunities back in your home, in your municipalities, and in your communities to collaborate and work on these efforts together. So we've got about 18 slides, so let's go ahead and get started with that. And we'll kick off, just kind of briefly overview the mission for the Safe Routes to School program. Our program here serves school communities to create safe and equitable places and opportunities that enable physical activity, lower the obesity rate and risk while traveling to and from school. I thought it'd also be really important, Rolf kind of touched on this very briefly, about the history of Safe Routes to School in Denver. And this slide helps provide that timeline and history of Safe Routes to School in Denver, really focusing on the fact that Safe Routes to School started off as a public health initiative here in the city and county of Denver. There were some grant infrastructure projects that were applied for in the 2010s, but really the focus of Safe Routes to School was in the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, or DDPHE, where it started off with the CALC program. Shortly after, in the mid-2010s, the Public Health Department identified that they were making really great strides with education, with encouragement activities at schools and in communities here in Denver, but they realized that they needed a counterpart in, at the time, Denver Public Works, and really began to work on identifying an opportunity for getting somebody in Denver Public Works that could lead in that infrastructure space. That first transportation planner for Safe Routes to School in Denver Public Works was hired in 2018. The other milestone that I want to highlight on this chart here is the Safe Routes to School Action Plan that was completed in 2021. And then the last thing that I really wanted to briefly highlight with kind of giving this overview and giving this is that there are multiple ways to really think about Vision Zero, safety, and Safe Routes to School in your communities. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. Start where you can, take bite-sized pieces. If it's starting with public health and moving into infrastructure to find a cohesive and robust network, do that. If it starts with infrastructure and then brings in the public health groups, there are certainly other departments and teams that you can leverage in your communities to help create those robust programs and find co-benefits among one another. Jumping in, though, a little bit further, and we're going to kind of really dive into the Safe Routes to School Action Plan here. Wanted to set a baseline for schools in Denver. And on your screen, you can see that approximately City and County of Denver hosts 300 schools within our boundaries. That includes public, private, charter, and kind of the alternative education modes as well. In the Safe Routes Action Plan, we also identified that about 68% of our schools are located within a half mile of the Vision Zero high injury network. And in 2018, there was an independent study done that was estimated about 14% of students at the time were using some form of active transportation to get to and from school. One asterisk that I'd like to highlight, of course, is that this is pre-COVID. It's very possible that a lot of those values may have shifted and changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the last thing to highlight here is access to infrastructure. And very broadly, infrastructure is defined as signs, striping, sidewalks, bikeways, traffic signal infrastructure, pedestrian signal infrastructure. All of that was kind of combined together to create a compiled score. And here in Denver, we see that there's kind of, again, a little bit of a three-way split in terms of who has access to active infrastructure that really helped to guide where our prioritization goes to. For the Safe Routes Action Plan, though, we have two overarching goals for the program and the action plan. We want to double the rate of students that are walking, biking, and rolling to and from school from 14 to 30% by 2026. And again, another tie-in with Vision Zero here is making sure that we have that safety focus and lens and ensuring that there are zero traffic fatalities or serious injuries for youth 18 years or under by 2026 additionally. I wish I could dive into a lot of the nuance here with our emphasis areas, but wanted to briefly highlight that in the Safe Routes Action Plan, there are 50 strategies identified spread across these 8 emphasis areas that you see on your screen. Each one of these strategies helps really guide the Safe Routes program to where we work, how we do our work, and also how we measure our work, kind of speaking to that evaluation criteria that Rolf highlighted that's so important and crucial to our Vision Zero efforts in the city and county of Denver. In the Safe Routes Action Plan, which is, I'll just briefly highlight, it is available online, denvergov.org/SRTS. You can take a peek at that there. But we have 3 pillars of the Safe Routes to School Action Plan that you see on your screen. Equity, we created a trip distance-based approach for our schools. And we also, again, you leveraged a lot of the data that Vision Zero has for a safety-based approach. Just to give an example real quick, though, equity, DOTI has an equity index that we've developed using US Census values. It's a composite score for our neighborhoods and our areas. That's a GIS analysis using a lot of raster imagery and map algebra to combine all of this information together and identify where does DOTI see that neighborhoods have been disinvested in historically and where we need to focus our efforts. Not all of our efforts, but a significant portion of those efforts to make sure that we are engaging in communities that have historically been marginalized, and disinvested in. The trip distance-based approach, a very novel approach I think we took here with the schools. The 300 schools in the Safe Routes to School Action Plan are all prioritized and classified, as either a neighborhood, community, or a regional school. That helps to inform our prioritization of the 300 schools and where Safe Routes to School operates and works, but it also helps to identify which of the 6 E's might be really important to focus on for each individual school. Because as I think a lot of us as practitioners know in this webinar today, every school has a little bit of a different story, a little bit of a different need, different site context, and so on. To highlight some of those 6 E's, I wanted to use a project example that we had here in Denver. And just as a brief overview for this project, it was installed in February this year, Q1, and right around the President's Day holiday. It was 7 pedestrian refuge islands that were installed at 4 intersections adjacent to 2 elementary schools. And, kind of kicking off, one of those first 6 E's is engagement. In this case, Rolf alluded to this, but here in Denver, we do travel plan studies, or what we call them. They're individual focused studies on specific schools that have been prioritized through the Safe Routes to School Action Plan. Those studies do an existing conditions analysis, do public outreach with both the school staff and the school parents, caregivers, and students, if possible, and then help to develop recommendations that could be programmed in the Safe Routes to School budget. From an equity standpoint, the Montbello neighborhood is identified in DOTI's Equity Index. This is also, both of these schools are both identified and classified as neighborhood and community schools in the Safe Routes to School Action Plan, as we just covered. And then engineering, we worked with our engineering teams, looked at some of the FHWA proven safety countermeasures that we'll briefly highlight a little bit later in the slide deck here, but worked to make sure that we were looking at these, some of these were uncontrolled pedestrian crossings in front of these schools. How do we enhance these? How do we use these proven safety countermeasures? And also provide some traffic calming at and around these schools. So on the screen here, you see a picture of 3 of those islands adjacent to Maxwell Elementary in the Montbello neighborhood. And then here we see another one of those pedestrian refuge islands adjacent to Barney Ford Elementary in the Montbello neighborhood, about a quarter-mile away from Maxwell Elementary. The last 3 E's here, we looked at encouragement opportunities. What did we think we're going to see more pedestrian activity? So looking at these opportunities to help connect these neighborhoods to these schools where we find that there's opportunity to encourage more active travel to and from these schools with their enrollment maps that DPS publishes on an annual basis. From an education standpoint, we worked with the schools to do coffee with the principal. That allowed us to go to the school and talk with parents and caregivers, explain why these countermeasures were selected, help them understand how these were benefits to their communities, and just kind of talk about the general application of the Safe Routes to School program in their neighborhoods and in their communities. Additionally, this was a really great opportunity to step back and work with the Denver Public Schools Crossing Guard program. Denver does provide funding for the Crossing Guard program. DPS administers that program, so they have about 45 to 50 crossing guards spread throughout the city and county of Denver at schools. There is a crossing guard adjacent to Barney Ford Elementary here, and this was a wonderful opportunity to work with the crossing guard lead and the crossing guard stationed here to work with them and educate them on how to use this traffic infrastructure. How could that best utilize enhancing and encouraging safe travel to and from this school? How is this going to keep that crossing guard safe, and how they should operate to help facilitate safe crossings for pedestrians adjacent to the school too. So this was a really great example. We leveraged a lot of opportunities here. We were able to work with our paving team, in fact, to actually install these pedestrian refuge islands, as these locations were identified in our 2023 paving plans. So, prior to having that coordination, we weren't able, it was very possible that we would install after the roadways were paved, and could have potentially led to us cutting up newly laid asphalt. But in this case, we were able to work with our teams, deliver the projects at a less expensive cost for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, which was a big win. But we also maintained a good asset, or a good state of repair for the roadway asset that we have in front of these schools. I want to shift a little bit because it's wonderful to do all of these things, but without a lot of the back-end framework, it can be really difficult to wrangle action plans in your communities. And Rolf and the Vision Zero program really helped establish a wonderful way to manage both this Vision Zero and the Safe Routes to School action plans. Rolf, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there are 67 action plan strategies in the new 2023 action plan?
That was actually the old one. The new
Oh,
one has like over 150, I think.
oh wow.
So
So
it's a lot to wrangle. So
yes.
using, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So we doubled it for Vision Zero, but the Safe Routes Action Plan has 50 strategies in it. We use this Power BI dashboard in a unique way. So there's a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that kind of fills in the information for this dashboard. But what we do to kind of manage these programs on the back end is we identify team members who are accountable. And I'm using myself as an example here for the Safe Routes Action Plan. You can see some of the strategies that we have in the Safe Routes Action Plan on your screen. We also identify team members who are responsible. So the accountable person is typically that person who is working on establishing annual goals, quarterly objectives, making sure that we have those bite-sized chunks that add up to that annual goal. Responsible team members tend to be those people who are out there in the field doing the work and helping to achieve these strategies. Want to make sure to highlight that there is definitely overlap. I am definitely accountable and responsible for multiple things in the Safe Routes Action Plan, just like Rolf is for the Vision Zero action plan. But so every year we take a step back as a leadership team. We work on making sure that we are defining annual goals. Every quarter, that person who was identified as an accountable person to the action plan strategies identifies a bite-sized chunk to take out of that annual goal. What is one thing that they think that they can accomplish each quarter? At the end of every quarter, we update that status as either complete or not complete. Not complete isn't, to put anybody in the spotlight or highlight anything wrong with any of the work they're doing. Rather, this is an opportunity to really check in and review the strategy. Maybe there was an unforeseen challenge or barrier that was identified in one of the quarters that's going to slow down delivery. Or maybe there was a funding gap that wasn't identified or something along those lines. This gives us the opportunity to take a step back on a quarterly basis and make sure that we're really being thoughtful and intentional with each of these strategies as they're active in our respective action plans. Additionally, with the way that we've set this up in Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Power BI, we're also able to then also provide a really robust annual report every year where we're able to look back, take a look at, did we achieve the overall goal? If yes, we can report on that. And actually on the next slide, we can kind of see the 2022 first year of the Safe Routes Action Plan kind of on your screen there. So we have the 8 emphasis areas in kind of the center and right side of your screens, highlights what strategies in green were identified or marked as complete. The gray mark the strategies that were long-term strategies that were on hold. And then there were 2 strategies that were listed as not complete due to unforeseen barriers and challenges that were identified during the calendar year. Maybe that was capacity, maybe that was a policy or procedure that needed to be kind of set up in place so that we had that framework to really work from, so that we were standardizing our work and being purposeful and meaningful in that work. But this really helped me, for example, with writing our year 1 kind of roll up and annual status and providing that to the leadership teams at Dottie so that we were able to effectively make sure that we were checking our commitments to the residents in the city and county of Denver here. From here, I want to kind of shift and focus on the importance and integration of Vision Zero and Safe Routes to School. Rolf, I'll invite you to jump in if there's anything that you want to add here. But the first thing that I want to kind of dive in on and talk about here are the FHWA Proven Safety Countermeasures. The Vision Zero program here at Dottie have really adopted these proven safety countermeasures that FHWA has presented. These are a lot of opportunities that we have explored with our traffic signal operations with reflective backplates, for example, or edge striping with our operations teams on some of our higher trafficked roadways. But this is a standard practice for our Vision Zero team who uses that safe systems approach that's identified through these proven safety countermeasures and talked about. The Vision Zero team uses these for what we call our road safety audits when we go out and walk the corridors that are identified as our high injury networks and identify either operational or infrastructure opportunities that we can enhance the safety for roadway users on these corridors. The other thing that I'd like to highlight, if you're unfamiliar with these, is that the FHWA has also created kind of 1 to 2 page cut sheets for each of these countermeasures that highlights some of the safety benefits, data, crash mitigation factors, so So these are really helpful opportunities to also standardize the way that we talk and work with our communities to make sure that we're providing transparency and communicating the reason why decisions were made for those communities. Leading into that, something else that the Vision Zero team has really been working on and has led to some specific work for the Safe Routes to School program is our speed limit reduction for our local roadways here in the city and county of Denver. And the ordinance was approved in 2022, December last year, by Denver City Council. Implementation for this began in 2023. I think at last count, we have a ArcGIS dashboard that our consultant updates, or our contractor, pardon me, updates when they either remove or install signs in the field, so that we can kind of get a live tracking on where they are and how they're working their way through the city. But right now we're working on retiring signs that we've identified through the asset management program that we have here at Dottie of older road limit signs, and then installing these new kind of gateway signs that you see in the top right of Denver law, speed limit 20 miles an hour except as posted. You can see an example of the speed limit sign assembly in the field, kind of in the center. And then we also deployed a yard sign program. And we use that opportunity to distribute these signs to city council offices, registered neighborhood organizations here in Denver, to help also spread the message that the local speed limit ordinance in Denver on local roadways is 20 miles an hour as of December last year. That work really helped lead to the opportunity to review and revise and propose opportunities for the school zone establishment that we have here in the city and county of Denver. So we really kicked this effort off late last year, as you can see on the screen, where we did some research, looking at some nationwide best practices, talking with other local practitioners and nationwide practitioners. How do they establish school zones in their municipalities, in their counties? This work does actually align with two of our action plan strategies. So a lot of alignment with the Safe Routes Action Plan. Throughout the 2023 calendar year, we've iterated, we've proposed new changes, we've adjusted those changes. We're actually getting to the point where we are in final review and working towards adoption by Denver City Traffic Engineer. So we're really excited about those changes. But this is kind of step one of the work here, right? We can establish the policy and procedure, but next, very similar to the speed limit ordinance and speed limit reduction, we're going to need to work on making sure that we've got all those signs deployed out in the field. And finally, I thought it might be really a great crucial opportunity to think about, some of the creative hard work that our partners in the Office of Community and Business Engagement have done here at Dottie. And our partners, and inside of the OCBE team, we have the Community Active Living Coalition, or CALC team, who also help with a lot of Safe Routes to School work with encouragement, education out in the field. And the three programs that I really briefly wanted to highlight is our Teacher Champion program, which is an opportunity that was funded through a non-infrastructure grant with the Colorado Department of Transportation, our state transportation agency. In the last grant cycle, we had 3 schools where we taught safe, active travel to and from school. So biking, rolling, walking to and from those schools. We did pre and post tests to assess whether or not students were absorbing the material and learning in the space. We did parent surveys, parent caregiver surveys to see, and kind of gauge what are the things that might need to change at and around schools to encourage families to use more active transportation to get to and from school. In the new grant cycle, we're really excited to double our capacity here. We're going to be working with 6 schools in Denver. And then in the next calendar year, we'll be expanding that even further, which we're really excited about. Additionally, this work also focuses on our bike and roll and walk and roll activities on an annual basis. So we've been making sure that we're programming with schools, getting people, walking, biking, excited about using active transportation to get to and from school. And you can see that with the picture there, kind of center on the bottom with Dinger, the Colorado Rockies baseball team mascot, who went out to a school last year, led our walk and roll activities. Kids were really excited about it. We did a remote park and walk in. So families parked and kind of gathered at a park that was nearby the school and then walked in about a half mile into the school. Very successful event and very great opportunities that we have there with the Teacher Champion program. This is kind of a train the trainer style. So education modules developed by teachers for teachers to deliver this material in schools. Additionally, thinking about safe routes to school for the younger kiddos, your early childhood education, we have our BASE program, which is our booster and seatbelt engagement program. That is funded through a state federal highway safety office grant and also supplemented through AAA through a private grant. But we have child seat technicians who are trained in installing car seats and booster seats in cars. They go out and do public outreach events where they help with installing these car seats and booster seats. They also go out and do tallies to understand, and observations where we might see that there's future opportunity to go out and do this kind of education to make sure that kids are being transported safely when being transported in a vehicle itself. And then the last one that I want to highlight, I think a lot of us on this webinar are probably familiar that past Safe Route grant opportunities were not applicable to high schools. And so our team really took a step back and thought about how can we expand to that stakeholder group. And in this way, again, we went through the Highway Safety Office, received a grant, and we've programmed the opportunity with a Teen Safe Streets program where we kind of bring on high school students who are able to develop safety messaging, go to outreach events, prepare outreach materials, and encourage their peers to think about being more safe at and around their schools and while they're traveling in the public. So pictures on the screen, the one on the left center is one of those engagement opportunities doing booster and child seat education. Top right is the Teen Safe Streets program out in front of one of our high schools here in Denver. And then again, Dinger leading the kids onto their charge to school one morning last year in October. And just want to kind of briefly touch on, Rolf already highlighted, future opportunities here. I won't go into each one of these, but just wanted to highlight, right? We're really excited to continue working on our Safe Routes to School travel plans. We do learn a lot working directly with these schools, understanding what those barriers and challenges are, developing these recommendations, but also figuring out ways that we can leverage other programs and resources here at Denver that have co-benefits with us, whether that's through the health department with air quality, whether that's through neighborhood transportation planning. There are a lot of different ways that we can really work together to realize combined goals in neighborhoods and at and around schools. Rolf briefly touched on this, but ideally one day we are able to deploy a K through 12 education that's really mindful about our audience that we're teaching to. So maybe elementary schools, learning bike, walk, and roll activities. Elementary, you start introducing transit. In high school, start teaching about safe driving habits. Maybe it's shared micromobility. But as Rolf highlighted, this is a really great opportunity to emphasize empathy in the roadway, help educate roadway users in the future so that we all have a common shared understanding of the various ways that we each choose to get around in Denver. And then the last thing, and Corey can jump in and correct me if I'm incorrect here, but I think we talked about, Safer Streets for All grants. Corey mentioned those. They can be definitely used for Vision Zero action plans, but also could be used to help establish a Safe Routes to School action plan. There are opportunities abound at this point in time through the Infrastructure Act that was passed last year. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Corey. Wanted to thank you for everybody's time, your attention, your work in your communities to enhance active transportation for school-age children and their caregivers. We provided a lot of information today. There's always room to learn from each of you. So you see our email address on the screen. It's a resource inbox. You're welcome to reach out. I know we weren't able to dive into all the nuance, but hopefully this was helpful for everybody today. Corey?
Thanks so much, John, and thanks, Rolf, for sharing your experience and expertise. I think there are a lot of really great things going on in Denver that a lot of people, hopefully can be inspired by and learn from. And, also just recognizing that, if your community is not in the same place as Denver, obviously they've had their Vision Zero goal for a while, they've had their Safe Routes to School program for a while. There's still plenty of opportunities for you to, kind of partner and grow your own, collaboration between Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero. So even if you are just starting a Vision Zero program or thinking about starting a Vision Zero program, hopefully these can give you all some ideas for what this type of collaboration can look like. And before we jump into our Q&A. Rolf, thanks so much for answering some of the questions while John was presenting. So we always have a lot of questions and can't get to everything. So I want to make sure that we're able to answer everybody's questions here. So just a little recap for those of you who might have missed some of the questions that came into the question box. Somebody asked if Denver has dedicated Safe Routes to School engineer that works on Safe Routes to School projects, and how many Safe Routes to School action plans do you implement each year? And so Rolf just said that there are several engineers help design Safe Routes to School safety projects. And often it depends on the location for which engineer will be assigned to which project. So in short, yes, there are engineers dedicated to working on Safe Routes to School projects. There was a question about who was helping to develop the K through 12 multimodal curriculum. And so, and are you working with educators to do that? And it looks like you are. So the traffic safety education activities are being done in collaboration with educators, which is great. So they kind of help develop that curriculum and implement it. Someone asked if Denver is a NACTO member and has that been helpful for implementing Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero goals. Yes, Denver is a part of NACTO, and yes, that's been helpful for implementing Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero. And then we had a few questions, and we had a few kind of like engineering speed limit questions that are in the chat box as well. Somebody asked about Safe Routes to School action planning and how that was developed. That was developed with the help of a consultant. And as John mentioned, there are a lot of opportunities now for planning grants for whether it's Safe Routes to School or Vision Zero. So if you're kind of starting to think about, how do you develop a Safe Routes to School plan or Vision Zero plan, take a look in your state for Safe Routes to School or Vision Zero planning grant opportunities. And if you're not sure, you're welcome to, reach out to us at the partnership. I know that planning grants and getting grant funding can be a bit confusing. So I want to make sure that you all, are able to access those resources as well. Somebody else has a question. How many coordinators are dedicated to your Safe Routes to School program at the DOT? And is it a combination of in-house coordinators and also consultants? So like, John, I know that you're one of the main Safe Routes to School, people at DOT, and I was curious if there are any others.
Yeah, I'd say that John is the primary lead for managing the program, right? But we work in a weak matrix, so we matrix across many different divisions as well as departments to influence work that had been identified through our goals and values in our action plan. So with that, you talk about, well, how many engineers or how many, other coordinators. We definitely matrix across and influence the work in other divisions. So it's not that we're working in a silo or we have like our own team. That own team, I'd say, speaks to the accountable one. So oftentimes there would be an engineer who sits in our meetings, and they are the one who is accountable to make sure that the other engineering related work is being completed within their division. So therefore, we don't have to have all the engineers attend the weekly meeting, whatever, right? The other engineers are responsible for ensuring that work is moving along and doing the work, but we have that one accountable person to ensure that in fact it is.
Got it. Thank you. We have another question about e-bikes, another hot topic in the Safe Routes to School world. Has the increase in e-bike use by students brought changes in the Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero efforts in Denver?
That's a great question. Rolf?
So I would say I see more parents using e-bikes, especially the city released a rebate for e-bikes, which exploded the number of people buying e-bikes. And now the state has done that, and you can actually double up the state and the city rebate to make it even more attainable for people to purchase an e-bike. But yeah, I've seen so many more parents biking their children to school on an e-cargo bike than I had. This is anecdotal, right? This is still very new,
Right.
but I think anecdotally you'd see that, and I think it speaks to us to continue to improve our infrastructure to better meet the needs in terms of e-bike parking at schools and drop off, instead of maybe that kiss and go drive-through lane. But how can we make it easier for people on bikes to drop their children off? But many of our e-bikes have age restrictions. They're very powerful vehicles, I'd say. Bike is a vehicle. And being an owner of one over the past couple weeks, they can move pretty quick. They have a lot of torque. So there's a reason for those age requirements.
Yep. Thanks, Rolf. We'll be talking about e-bikes for many, many years to come. So just the start of that, conversation. You have a question about the education curriculum, if that's been adopted by the State Department of Education, and who are the teachers being trained by when it comes to implementing that, that curriculum? And do they get like professional development credits, or how does that work?
That's a great question. So our action plan was just released this past January or February. That was an action in it. So we haven't actually implemented that whole curriculum. We have implemented parts and pieces of it under John's leadership earlier on, oftentimes geared towards pedestrian and bicycle education. Maybe John, you can talk about the teacher champion program a little bit, but our vision with Vision Zero is expanding that to a holistic, all modes incorporated. We see a lot of bike and pedestrian education, but what about scooters? What about transit? What about, yes, we've seen some bike maintenance and whatnot, but the whole soup to nuts from K through 12 and increasing that frequency of exposure to traffic safety and modal education would be a really great direction to train up our next generation of multimodal users. But John, if you want to talk about the teacher champion program that you have managed.
Yeah, so our non-infrastructure grant that we have with the Colorado Department of Transportation and the Teacher Champion Program, we partner with schools. We work with those schools to identify teachers who work at that school who have a vested interest, really passionate leaders there in those schools who are invested in transportation safety and multimodal access to and from schools. So for an example, we had a teacher champion at one of our pilot schools last year who led their own bicycle nonprofit to help make sure that kids had access to bicycle repairs and was ecstatic about doing this program. It's a semester-long program, so we do it in both the fall and winter, or fall/early winter, and then the January winter/spring semester here at Denver Public Schools. I think probably the innovative thing that we do here with the Teacher Champion Program is that we provide stipends to those teachers. So we recognize that our educators are oftentimes very overworked and do not have a whole lot of time to really engage in this kind of work. But we do make sure that we are providing a stipend to those teachers to thank them for their time, to thank them for their leadership in these schools, which I think is a fairly unique aspect of the Teacher Champion Program itself.
Yeah, that's great. Like you said, people, don't have a lot of time or capacity and are, putting in the work. So it's great that you're able to do that. I also have a question just about the way that you all, like you two work together. So, as far as meeting and communications, deciding, who does what, even just, from like a very practical standpoint of kind of merging two programs and, you two leading both programs, like how does your work partnership look like? How does that function?
John, if you want to start out, go for it.
Yeah, I think one thing to highlight and the way, right? So, and there was a question about this in the chat about kind of how is Safe Routes to School funded. I think I may have answered that in a text response, but it's a mix, a blend of a lot of different funding streams here at the City and County of Denver. We do get capital improvement program funding. We get a little bit of general fund opportunities here from the city. We also have some operating dollars. But I think the highlight here with how Rolf and I really work together is that our resources between the Vision Zero and Safe Routes programs tend to be shared resources and highly sought after with a lot of the other programs and projects here in the City and County of Denver, because more often than not, and I think Rolf is smiling over here, a bike project is a Vision Zero project. A bike project that goes alongside a school is a Safe Routes to School project. Mm-hmm. So there's always opportunities to leverage the resources that we have internally. And just like we have a Power BI dashboard for the tracking of the action plan strategies in the matrix, we also have a Power BI dashboard. So when a travel plan study concludes at a school, for example, or a Vision Zero road safety audit concludes their corridor walkthroughs and their studies, we maintain a spreadsheet database that we can feed into a Power BI dashboard, which also helps us to kind of forecast those annual budget requests that we make each year to our budgeting and finance teams that ultimately then go to the mayor's office for proposals and then city council for approval. Rolf, anything to kind of add in there before I go too far?
I saw another question in the chat about how not only do we work internally, but how do we work with our peer agencies? And, something that we saw in our crash data was that 50% of our crashes are happening from people who live outside the city or commuting in. And their crash stats are very similar to ours here in the metro area. So something I'd recommend is just picking up the phone and calling your neighboring counterpart and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing? It can be a pretty informal conversation, especially now that everybody has the ability to jump on a Zoom call, so to speak. And it's been really valuable in understanding, especially those corridors that are boundaries to our jurisdictions that sometimes we don't always see the full crash picture, and being able to work together on making improvements that benefit community at large. So I'd say identifying who those folks are, pick up the phone, give them a call. We host actually a quarterly meeting, peer-to-peer exchange. And now with Dr. Cog, or our MPO, they have taken that on as well. And we work very closely with them, trying to help them implement their Vision Zero action plan as it relates to our Vision Zero action plan too. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ralph. And that suggestion of just like getting on the phone or getting on Zoom and just chatting with somebody, that's like a perfect segue into just like some really practical strategies for, how you can start forging these partnerships between Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero. So like I mentioned, even if you're like just getting started with Vision Zero in your community, or just exploring the idea, or even if you do have a more developed program, like sometimes that partnership does just start by, jumping on a call and making that connection and saying, hey, what are some ways that we can really work together to achieve our shared goals? Like John mentioned, if there's an infrastructure improvement project in front of a school that's a Vision Zero project, it ends up being a Safe Routes to School project too, just, because it's located in front of a school. So even sometimes just the way that we name things or talk about things, ultimately there are, many benefits outside of our individual programs. So just, taking the opportunity to, just kind of see what's happening in your community and what projects, what opportunities are out there could be a really great way to get started thinking about partnerships between Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and close us out. And I know that John and Rolf, you might still be responding to some people in the chat box, which is totally fine. And I just wanted to, first off, say a huge thank you both to Rolf and John for sharing your expertise and energy and experience working on Denver Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero programs. Again, like I mentioned, I think it's a great example of what this type of partnership how this type of partnership can really benefit a community and benefit your individual programs to kind of like hopefully achieve this larger goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries and keeping kids safe on their routes to school. We also have a new resource, which will be on our website later on today, that talks a bit more about some other strategies for integrating Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero. So again, it has some things that John and Rolf talked about today, some partnership planning strategies, collaborative program activities, and examples. Of course, the example from Denver, and also I saw somebody from Albuquerque on earlier. I don't know if you're still here, but there's another really great example of this integration in Albuquerque. They created a Youth Vision Zero initiative where the school district partnered with the Vision Zero team to do some Vision Zero action planning specifically for schools and young people. So that's a great resource that I can link you all to as well. So that is on our website, or will be on our website shortly. And we'll also be having another webinar in a few weeks, also focusing on Colorado. In Boulder, we're going to be talking a bit about community engagement and trying to plot out our partnerships in order to build our own capacity and avoid burnout. So the partnership trend will continue. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you need me, here's my contact information. You also get a follow-up email from me with the webinar recording today, the slides, how to contact Rolf and John, and a few other resources and reminders, and our survey. So we are at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Rolf, John, thank you all so much for being here. I know that I definitely learned a lot from you all. And we hope that we see everybody at our next webinar. And again, keep an eye out for the slide deck, recording, surveys, links to additional resources, and contact information. So thanks, everybody. Have a great one, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.